Hello. Have you ever asked yourself what it is that you're doing here? And by here, I mean this planet. What am I doing here? The age-old question. I have. And I'm curious to know if anybody has come up with an answer. I've come up with an answer, and I'm going to share it with you today. That's right. Come for the insanity. Stay for the existential rambling. You have stumbled upon another episode of Hug Me, I'm Insane, and my name, as always, is Perry Johnson. Today I'm going to talk about why we're here. And I think to start things off, it's important to talk about what it is that we're taught in terms of what it is that we're doing here, our purpose, versus what many of us discover in the process of living life. And the disparity between those two messages. And so what do I mean by that? So I'm talking specifically about the idea that we go to school and we get trained in some kind of a profession, and we go out and we do that profession, and maybe we raise a family, maybe we don't. And in the process of executing that profession or living our lives doing these things that we've been trained to do, we consume, we buy things. And we're taught that in order to be happy, you need this thing, and you need to have this relationship, and your life needs to look a certain way. And much of this is exacerbated, or that agenda, I guess a better way to say it, is pushed largely by capitalism. And then at some point, we buy the things, and we get the degrees, and we get the careers, and we get the big paychecks, and maybe we build the family, maybe we don't. And while the family can bring us joy, a lot of the times we end up at a place in our career or in our relationship or both or some kind of combination where there's a nagging little question, and that question is that it? Is this it? Is this the culmination of everything that I've been taught? And if it is, why do I feel so goddamn shitty? And so I think in this process of realizing these, I don't know, for lack of a better term, capitalistic teachings that we're all indoctrinated with, many of us land in a place of despondency, and we can become anxious, we can become depressed. We invariably will compare ourselves to others and how others are doing, which is always a losing proposition because particularly with social media, it's hard not to arrive at the conclusion that we're not living up to the expectation and the ideals, particularly when we base it off of how everybody else is doing by way of social media, which of course, as everybody is well aware, is a facade. And so we'll end up in this place where we're asking ourselves the question, and maybe this is a conscious question, and maybe it's a subconscious, more feeling question. Why am I here? Why am I here? And we begin to look deeper. And we begin to ask more questions. We begin to ask the hard questions. And I think that if you're in that place where this nagging little voice is inspiring you to ask that question, I would posit that you're on the right path. I think it's a very important question to ask. It's even more important to question everything that we've been taught. And so we begin to ask ourselves that despite the degree and the career and the house and the nice car and the big paycheck, despite all of those things, if I still feel that I lack purpose and I'm not understanding what it is that I'm doing walking around on this planet, then I need to be asking some deeper questions. Some more difficult questions, I guess you could say. Because to ask those questions means to admit that we're discontent, that we feel that we do, in fact, lack purpose. And that's a very hard realization to arrive at. Because in order to land there, we would have had to have put in a shit ton of work and time. And some of us may be resentful at being lied to. But I'm not sure that being lied to is constructive. I prefer instead to pose the question, what more do I need to discover? And so I'm going to share with you some of the answers that I've come up with in terms of my asking these questions. And I think it can be best described by an encounter I had with a friend of mine who's a lot older than me, and I consider him to be one of my greatest mentors. He's a very, very spiritual person, and we always have the most amazing conversations. His name is Bill, and we were having lunch one day last year, and I was saying to him, Bill, I'm struggling because I've realized that there's only two things that truly bring me joy: creating art and service. But I'm having a hard time reconciling why I have to choose between the two of them. And this is what he said to me. He said, Perry, they're the same. They're the same. And it completely blew my mind, because in that moment I realized that the act of creating is in itself a form of service, because that thing that I create is an extension of the will of the divine. It's not coming from me, it's coming through me, and I was just the channel. And so God, for whatever reason, wanted to express that thing. And if you study any of the great artists, they'll tell you this. They have some version of this exact story, that this creativity doesn't come from them, and they have a very humble explanation or description of their creative process. This is how most great artists will describe their process. And I'm by no means implying that I'm by any stretch a great artist. I'm just referring to the creative process by way of how the masters have described it. And it's mirrored my own experience in the sense that anything good that I've ever created, whether it be photography or music or whatever, has come about by way of me being the least involved. In other words, it just suddenly came to me, and I saw the thing, and I was able to capture it with my photography, or I heard the melody, or the chord progression just fell out of me one day when I picked up the guitar, or something like that. But the point of all that is that act of creating and me capturing whatever that thing is now an opportunity for somebody else to consume and themselves be afforded the opportunity to also share in that expression of the divine. And I think that this is one of the reasons why art is so powerful on so many levels, is that it speaks to us on so many levels. But the primary one is of a place of divinity, where we're able to view the world in a way that we've never viewed it before. And that's service. Because now I'm connecting with something bigger than me. Whatever that thing is going to inspire me to move forward in whatever way, and however it's inspired me in a way that wouldn't have happened had I not been exposed to it. And I don't know if this is making sense, but the point is that even if I write the simplest little silly song and I put it out there and one person likes it, then it will have done its job. If one other person responds to it in a way and has some kind of an emotional connection to it or some type of experience with it, then it's done its job. Because God doesn't give a shit whether one person listens to it or 1 million people listen to it. My job is not to control that aspect of it. My job is to get the hell out of the way and interpret it. When Bill said this to me, I suddenly started to think about all the people that I know who are creative in a myriad of ways, in all these different ways, not just in the creation of art, but they're creative in terms of how they work with numbers, and they're master accountants. Because I am not good with numbers and I need accountants. And I'm grateful that there are creative thinkers in terms of cash flow and taxes and all of that stuff. I suddenly began to see how everybody has a place in the world. The challenge that we have is that we're taught in a very different way about how to value ourselves. We're taught by way of an education system that rewards certain type of learners. And we're becoming better at recognizing these different types of learning so that kids who are coming up in the world feel nurtured and feel like they have some type of talent or that they have something to offer. But we still have a long way to go because there's still that capitalist piece where if I'm not either consuming or producing, then my value is limited. And what's even more puzzling about modern culture is how youth is put on a pedestal, particularly in terms of the spectacle of fame, and how we will hang on the quotes of these young famous people like they have really anything to offer us with minimal life experience. And our old people, our seniors, who have enormous wisdom and have had their asses handed to them by their own life journey, we sequester them away and sort of downplay their importance and their role. And that certainly wasn't true in terms of human existence, the way that we live for hundreds of thousands of years. It was the old people that we gave deference and reverence to, and we don't do that in modern society. And I think that there's an enormous amount of wisdom and opportunity that is lost by way of that piece about how our senior population is not valued. Because if you talk to any of them, well, I shouldn't say any of them. If you talk to most of them, they will give you some type of version of what it is that I'm talking about here, which is to find your thing and then go out and share that thing. And it can be anything. Like you might be hell on wheels with a knitting needle and somebody out there needs or wants to learn how to be a better knitter. I don't know. Like there's a thing that you're good at, that you're passionate about. The challenge is in clearing away all the clutter and the obscuration and the years and years of trauma and being, maybe some of you were bullied, I was, learning to tell ourselves a different story as adults that reinform our nervous system and our psyche and the dialogue that we have with ourselves about who we are. And that is something that takes time and an enormous amount of support. And none of us can do it alone. And yet we're raised in this individualistic society and taught that we should be able to think our way out of our problems. And if we can't, that there's something wrong with us. And it's just simply not true. And so this comes back again to everything that I always talk with all the people that I work with, is that, yes, it's an important question to ask ourselves, what am I doing here? But it's equally important to heal where we've come from. And there needs to be that balance. There needs to be that focus on unlearning the things that don't serve. And Sometimes those things can be done on our own, and other times, as I've said before, we need other people in order to help us heal those things so that we can come to a place of deeper and truer understanding of who we really are. If we're able to do that, if we're able to truly focus inwards, fearlessly focus inward, and discover what it is that motivates us, both good and bad, so that we know what it is that we need to heal and equally what it is that we can leverage, then we're on a path to discovering the answer to that question, why am I here? And the answer that I can give is that you're here because we need you. Somebody here needs what you have. The challenge is for you to find that thing. And so I'm going to leave it here. Until the next time, see you soon.